In this video, I'm going to talk about the Stafford Gambit, which is very interesting and very dangerous if your opponent doesn't know how to react to it. And it actually can be played in the higher level as well, because this gambit consists of very dangerous ideas. So let's check it out. So, white starts with 1 e4 and black replies with e5. We have knight f3, knight f6, and we have the Petroff, where white captures the pawn on e5. And after knight into e5, we are going to play the knight to c6. And after a couple of moves, we are going to have the Stafford Gambit. And this is the common setup in the Stafford Gambit. From here, the Stafford Gambit begins. And after d into c6, white is actually having 4 moves to continue the position. White can play d3, knight to c3, f3, or you can go for playing e5. And the basic idea of playing these 4 moves is to protect the pawn on e4. So first, let's check it out what will happen if white tries to play knight to c3. We are going to play bishop to c5. And before moving forward, I want to tell that in the Stafford Gambit, the common idea for black is to put the bishop on c5, put the knight on g4, and putting pressure on the pawn on f2. Basically, we are hitting for the king. We are basically aiming for the king. So after bishop to c5, black actually having 3 moves in the position. White can play bishop c4, white can play d3, or white can play h3, stopping this knight g4 idea. So first, if white tries to play bishop c4, we are simply going to play knight to g4, simply going for the pawn on f2, and white simple castle, defending the pawn double with the rook and the king. But now comes the legend move from the black side, queen to h4, and now the h2 pawn is double attack and the f2 pawn is triple attack. So definitely it's a fourth move for white to play h3 to stop the mate on h2. We have h3 and now we're simply going to play knight into f2. If we have rook into f2, then after queen into f2 check, king h1, and black is winning the game. And if white doesn't capture the knight and white plays queen f3 instead because the knight is attacking the queen, then after queen f3 we are simply going to play knight into h3 check. It's a double check, the king is forced to move, and after a couple of moves it's going to be game over for white. Okay, so this is what happens if white tries to play queen f3. So this is the basic idea if white tries to castle. We are going to put the knight on g4, we are going to put the bishop on c5, and put the queen on h4. It's game over for white. So this is what happens if white tries to play bishop c4. If white tries to play d3 in the position, just remember whenever this setup comes where the pawn is on d3 and the knight is on c3, you can simply play knight to g4, because now there's a double attack on the pawn on f2, and white can't actually protect the pawn on f2. So white is forced to protect the pawn by playing bishop to e3. But now we can simply grab the bishop with the knight. After f into e3, we have queen h4 check, g3, and now we simply have queen to g5. And now it's a double attack on the pawn on e3. And if white tries to defend the pawn by playing queen f3, then we can first play bishop g4, hitting the queen. And after queen f4, we can trade the queens. And after trading the queens, now white is having the options. He can capture the queen with the e pawn or with the g pawn. If he tries to capture the queen with the e pawn, then after e into f4, bishop f3, and the rook is trapped on h1, and it's completely winning position for black. And if white tries to capture the queen with the g pawn, then black can simply capture the pawn on e3 with the bishop. And if I compare the position by quantity, then it's an equal position. But if I compare the position with quality, then black is actually completely winning, because first of all, black is having the bishop pair. Second, black is able to control all the squares from the king. And third, there could be some ideas from the black side by playing bishop f3, trapping the rook, and even the pawn on f4 is falling apart. So it's completely winning position for black. So this is what happens if white tries to play d3. And if we look at what will happen if white tries to play h3, stopping the idea of knight g4, then we are going to simply play h5. And the basic idea of playing h5 here is, if white tries to play bishop to e2, we are going to play queen to d4. And if white tries to castle, then we have a very strong move, knight to g4. And after playing knight g4, the most common reply from the white side is to capture the knight on g4. But after h into g4, we have sacrificed a piece, but now in the exchange of a sacrifice, we have a open h file. And if I continue this position, then after a couple of moves, after d3, white idea is to play bishop e3, but now black can simply play queen to e5, and it's simply planning to checkmate the white king on h2. So if the only way for white to defend the checkmate is to play g3, but here comes the legend move, queen into g3, and it's a pretty nice mate. You cannot capture the queen with the f pawn because the pawn is pinned, and it's game over for white. So this is the basic setup what black plans in. So we have checked out what will happen after knight c3. We have checked all the three variations of bishop c4, d3, and h3. So let's check it out what will happen if white plays d3 at the place of playing knight to c3. If white tries to play d3, then black is simply going to play bishop c5. After playing bishop to c5, if white tries to play bishop to g5, which is one of the most common moves, simply pinning up the knight, then black is already having a very powerful move in the position, which is knight into e4, boom. And after knight into e4, white is going to capture the queen. And here comes the mate in 2 idea. Bishop into f2 check, king is forced to come on e2, and bishop g4 is game over for white. And if white does not go for capturing the queen in the position, and he goes for capturing the knight, then I can simply go for playing bishop into f2 check. You cannot capture the bishop because the queen is hanging, so you are forced to play king e2, but after bishop g4 check, king f2, we have queen into d1, and we are going to win the game. And if white doesn't go for capturing the knight as well, and if white tries to play bishop to e3 back, then black can already simply capture the bishop, and we simply have queen h4 check. g3 is forced to protect the checkmate, because if you try to play king e2, queen f2 is game over for white. So if you try to play g3, I can simply play knight into g3. If you try to capture the knight, the rook is dead, or else if you don't try to capture the knight, I'm already winning the game. So it's also one of the line which makes black win the game. After playing bishop to c5, we have bishop to e2. So definitely white is already preparing to castle in the position. We have h5, castle, and now we have knight to g4 by black. Going with the same idea to attack the king. We have bishop into g4. After bishop into g4, h into g4, white definitely not feeling well because black is already having an open file. So at the place of capturing the knight, it looks like to play h3, which is one of the most common move in the position. But now we are simply going to play queen to d6. And the idea is very simple. Now black is already threatening a checkmate on h2. So white tries to capture the knight, but after h into g4, it's still a checkmate on h2. And if you try to stop the checkmate, I can simply play queen into g3 and it's game over. And if you try to capture the knight with the bishop, then still I can capture the bishop with the pawn, and it's still, the white position is still falling apart. I can simply capture the h3 pawn. I'm having a pretty open position, and it's going to be game over for white. So this is what happens if white tries to play bishop e2 in the position. If white plays h3 at the place of playing bishop e2, then we can simply play bishop into f2 check. Actually, there are two moves in the position. You can also play bishop into f2 check, but you can also continue with h5. And here we have bishop e2, and we land in the same position where we have queen d6, castle, knight g4, and we are already threatening a mate on h2. We have a checkmate. So if I talk about after h3, if we go for playing bishop into f2 check, then after king into f2, we have knight into e4 check, and you basically can't capture the knight because the queen is hanging on d1. So after knight into e4 check, the most common reply from the white side looks to play king to g1, because moving king forward doesn't make any sense. king g1, and here comes queen d4 check, and after king h2 you can go for repeating up the position if you want. But if you don't want to repeat the position, then there is also another move of playing knight to f2 in the position, but it actually doesn't work because here white can simply play queen e1 check, and after playing bishop e6, white is having the two options. He can play queen e3 or he can play bishop e3. If he tries to play bishop e3, then I can simply give a check, capture the rook, and capture the pawn on b2. But okay, after knight to c3, castle, rook b1, queen into c2, rook into b7. It's basically like a rook versus two minor pieces. So it's your choice if you want to continue the position. But I must tell you that white is having the edge in the position already. So after knight f2, if white tries to play queen e3 at the place of bishop e3, which is a much better move, then we have to trade the queen, and after capturing the rook, after the long castle, I think it's a much better position, but it's still rook versus two minor pieces, which gives white much better winning chances. So I must say that after h3, at the place of going for capturing the pawn, you can go for playing h5. But okay, bishop into f2 is also a very interesting line. You can also definitely go for it. So this is what happens if white tries to play h3. So we have covered the d3 variation. So now let's check it out what will happen if white tries to play f3 in the position. After f3, black can actually continue the position by playing knight to h5. And the idea of black is to play queen to h4 check, and basically we need to burst white king. So after knight h5, if white tries to continue the position with knight c3, then we are going to simply play queen h4 check. And after g3, attacking the queen, we can simply go for capturing the pawn on g3. And after h into g3, we have queen into h1. And if you don't go for capturing the knight, I can simply pull the knight back, hitting the king. And it's a better position for black already, winning position actually. So this is the basic idea if white tries to play f3 in the position. So we have checked f3, we have checked d3, and we have already checked knight to c3. If I talk about what will happen if white tries to push the pawn on e5, then black can play knight to e4, and after knight e4, the most common reply from the white side looks to play d3, because now white is hitting the knight on e4. But actually this is what white wants. This is what black wants actually, because now black is simply going to play bishop c5, saying okay, I'm having no worries if you want to capture my knight on e4. And if white goes for capturing the knight on e4, then I'm already completely winning in the position, because I'm already having a very tremendously powerful move. Bishop into f2 check, boom. You can't capture the bishop because your queen is hanging on d1. And if you try to play king to e2, I can play bishop g4 check, and now it's still the queen is going to die. King into f2, queen into d1, and I'm completely winning the game. So after knight to e4, if you do not play d3, and if you play something like d4 in the position, then after playing d4, I can simply play queen to h4 in the position, and I'm already threatening this f2 checkmate. And the most common move in the position looks to play g3. Basically, you are hitting the queen and you are preparing to play bishop g2 on the next move, hitting the knight. But it turns out to be a blunder, because now I'm going to play knight into g3. You cannot capture the knight with the h pawn because the rook is hanging. And if you try to capture the knight with the f pawn, then I can simply play queen e4 check, and the rook is dead on h1. And black is going to win the game. So this is what happens if white tries to play e5. So I think I've covered the f3 variation, I've covered the e5 variation, and I've covered the d3 and the knight to c3 variation. So if you think this video have helped you very much, then make sure to like the video and subscribe the channel if you haven't done it. And please make sure to share this video with everybody, so that everyone watching the video will also get helped, and they would also able to increase their chess level skills by beating strong chess players. So I'm going to come up with these interesting videos for you. So till then, and stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.